Hey, it's Elizabeth. My new monthly recipe club, The Nourished Table, is for anyone who's ever stood in the kitchen at 5 p.m. thinking, I have no idea what to make. Each month, I send you 5 hand-picked, pre-tested recipes, a done-for-you shopping list, and simple ideas to turn each dish into multiple meals, so you can spend less time cooking and more time eating well. If you're ready for food to just feel taken care of, come join us at elizabethharrisnutrition.com/recipe-club. It's just $20 a month. You can cancel anytime, and you get access to the growing library of recipes each month.
Welcome to Wellness Rebranded.
We know there is so much conflicting health and fitness advice out there.
And you're tired of the wellness fads, endless diets, and impossible standards that make you feel like nothing you do is ever enough.
You're ready to tune into your mind and body and feel empowered around health.
We're the healing trio here to help you redesign your relationships with food, fitness, and yourself.
I'm Elizabeth, registered dietitian and certified intuitive eating counselor.
I'm Maria, licensed mental health therapist.
And I'm Tara, personal trainer.
Together, we're changing the narrative on health away from diet culture, hustle culture, and toxic positivity and towards healthful self-care.
So grab your water bottle, get ready to laugh, learn, and grow.
And let's start rebranding your wellness journey.
Hey, friends, we're super excited to jump into today's podcast episode. We have a really special guest that we're so excited to interview. Her name is Dr. Jenn Salib Huber. She's a registered dietitian, a naturopathic doctor, intuitive eating counselor, and author of Eat to Thrive in Menopause. Blending science, storytelling, and a healthy dose of humor, Jenn's work challenges the belief that health and happiness are measured on a scale. Her message is clear: your midlife body is not a problem to fix, it's a partner to nourish. She loves helping women navigate the physical and emotional changes of perimenopause and menopause, including their search for food freedom and body confidence. Working from a health at every size approach, she teaches women to become intuitive eaters and build body confidence at any stage of midlife. In addition to her one-to-one and group programs, she's the host of the Midlife Feast podcast and community that helps women undiet their lives after 40 so they can nourish a relationship with food that helps them discover the magic of midlife. So, Jenn, welcome. We're so happy you're here.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
And I should say, you've got just Tara and I today. Maria is off doing fun things with her family for summer break. So I was sharing with you before we jumped on that I already feel like I know you. I followed along with you on Instagram and your work for a long time. I absolutely love your book. And I would love to start off by asking you, one of the first things you say in your book that jumped out at me is that you want to change the belief that menopause is an ending and instead look at it as beginning. And I would love for you to start by telling us what you mean by that.
Well, I don't know what it was like for you guys growing up, but I certainly remember, you hit puberty, go through that phase, that stage. And then if you get pregnant, you have pregnancy, breastfeeding, if that's your choice, whatever. And then it kind of and then menopause, And it's like the end.
Yeah.
So
Nobody talks about it.
Nobody talks about it. And it really felt like everything after menopause was like an afterthought. Right? We spend so much time talking about puberty and pregnancy and early childhood and all that kind of stuff, but we don't talk about the fact that we're going to spend 30 or 40% of our life in postmenopause. So that's a third of our life or more, if we're lucky, in this new hormonal soup, as I call it. And so growing up, the narrative and the examples that I saw were the Mrs. Ropers from Three's Company, if anyone remembers that show. Or
Maria was just talking about her a few days ago, which is so random because I don't think I've heard that in 30 years.
Or the Golden Girls, right? That you end up widowed and living by yourself and with your mother and just that life is over. And so when I went into perimenopause early at 37 and I was fully menopausal by 44, I really wanted to change the narrative because by the time that I hit menopause, I was like, this is awesome. I love this age and stage. And it's not just about not having a period, but that is, so great.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's pretty life-changing on its own, right? Not having to plan your life around do I need to travel with pads and all that kind of stuff. But there's just something that is part of that reorganization of our brain, of our internal systems that really does change, I think, our experience. And I hear this from so many people that you go through the journey and it's not always fun. I'm not saying that it's fun to have hot flashes and crime scene periods and have your body change overnight, but that reorganization of what's important, what you believe, what you want, how you spend your time and your energy, it's very empowering, especially when you can also use that opportunity to redefine your relationship with yourself and your body and food, so that when you can come through the other side and you don't fear food anymore, and you're not spending your whole life trying to lose weight and on a diet, and you've found a movement routine that feels so awesome that you can't wait to do it until you're 80 or whatever it is, like you're no longer fighting that internal battle that so many of us carried with us from those tumultuous teen years. So yeah, I really want people to know that, and it's not just my experience. There's a lot of research to suggest as well that we're happier in postmenopause.
I actually see that with my clients a lot. So I train mostly women who are like perimenopause, like postpartum perimenopausal or fully menopausal. And their filters are just like, yep, I do not do anything for other people's like perceptions anymore. Like I fully live my life the way I want to live it, my most authentic self. And if people don't like it, like I don't care. Like the attitude is so prevalent that they're just like done performing for other people. And like the older I get, the more I'm like, yes, same.
Yeah, bring it on. I totally agree with you. One of the things I was thinking, the word that was popping into my mind as you were talking, Jen, is freedom. And I'm also in this phase of life. And there is just a tremendous sense of freedom of just like really knowing who you are, being more confident and fully able to stand in that, letting go of, some of the drama from earlier life. But also in my case, my kids are out of the house now. So we're empty nesters, and pair that with helping people find food and body freedom at that stage of life. And that's like a total paradigm shift, that really all of us are helping people find. And it's awesome to live it and help other people find it.
And yeah, 100% it's awesome, but it can also be a shitstorm when you're going through it. There's this thing, and I talk about it in the book, and I talk about it as much as I can. This group of symptoms, the not feeling like myself, which is something that I think anybody who works with midlife women is pretty used to hearing. It's like, I woke up one day and I don't recognize who I see in the mirror. I'm irritable and I'm anxious for the first time in my life, and I don't want to do the things that I want to do. And a lot of those overlap with, depression, and that also increases in perimenopause. But this whole idea of the identity shift that we go through is not talked about enough. And so it really is uncomfortable and scary for some people, and even lonely. I had somebody today describe it as lonely because she doesn't know who she is around even like her closest friends and colleagues anymore, because she just feels this shift that's happening. So it absolutely can be so empowering when you make it through the other side and you have the right supports, but it can also be really scary when you're going through it, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's like a vulnerable time. And I feel like I can't speak for the whole world, but I know like the fitness industry really like preys on women in this phase of their life where your hormones are crazy and you have to do this and you can't do that. And like we have all these rules about how people should be moving and acting and eating and sleeping.
Right.
And it's like it just feels to
cardio.
me like we're preying on women in a really vulnerable period.
Yeah, preying on them. And that's the whole meno washing in the industry too, right? Like menopause has become a business opportunity.
Yes.
And so if you can slap a menopause label on it, you can probably double your price. And there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of that. I often joke that I wish I was unethical. I wish I could drop some of my morals because I would probably have a lot more money.
Yeah.
You know what's funny is I took a menopause like fitness course a few years ago, and it was a great course. Like I learned a lot about like the mechanics of menopause, but when it comes to how I actually apply it in my clients' lives, it's like, oh, it's the same stuff that I tell everybody to do. Like, yes, we should be lifting. Yes, we need to do cardio, get enough sleep, minimize your stress. Like it's just kind of like normal stuff. And I'm like, did I really need like a whole class on just keep training the same way? Like that feels crazy.
And that's exactly what I say too. Like you're still human. Yeah, you're a
Yeah.
human who's gone through a
Yes.
life stage, but you're still a human body and your needs don't change that much.
Honestly, mic drop, right? Because I feel like that's such an important thing to get out at the beginning of a menopause conversation. It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be so crazy and stressful and extreme and all of the things. I have a question too, Tara, but go ahead and ask what you were going to ask. Because
No, I was just going to ask, like, being that we know that this is a vulnerable period and we're kind of like preyed on during this, do you have any guidelines for how to protect yourselves from those people who are just looking to make a quick buck?
Oh gosh, I think that could be a whole episode, right?
Mhm.
I think some general guidelines apply when you're getting nutrition information online, regardless of whether it's menopause information or not. First is, who are you getting it from? Lots of people have opinions on social media about nutrition, but not everyone is qualified to give those opinions. So, are you getting the right information from the right people? And obviously, I think that dietitians are kind of at the top of that credibility, scale, but there are other healthcare professionals who can share nutrition information. The difference is when it becomes advice, when it is do this because I said so, or do this because I have, case studies. Case in point, I had somebody comment on a post of my Instagram the other day, and her profile was, I can't even remember, but it was something like she's certified in like carnivore medicine or something like that. And, she was saying, oh, everything that you're saying is not a problem, or everything that, you're saying not to worry about. Those are all things that I help my clients with, of course. And I have lots of case studies. And I was like, the plural of anecdote is not data. You can't
Right.
take your
Correct.
study that you have sold them solutions to, like, let's be clear, and use that as evidence that what you're doing works. And what organization certifies carnivore medicine? She didn't reply, shockingly.
I wish people
Um,
could have seen all of our faces when you said that.
Yeah.
When you say carnivore medicine, I literally think of like polar bears. Oh, she must be in like a vet scientist or something.
And it was something like rewilding. And anyway, definitely not my vibe. But, so a lot of things that people send me, and I'm sure that anybody who works in this space gets a lot of similar questions. But, sometimes it can be presented in a very relatable, authentic way that feels like they're speaking to you. And that's good copywriting. That's good marketing, right?
Yeah.
If you read something and you're like, oh, that's me, that's good copywriting. It doesn't mean that it's a good product.
Right. And it doesn't mean
that is
that
what
it's evidence-based expertise.
exactly. Exactly. Like when people ask about supplements are such a big industry. And they'll say, what supplements do you recommend? And I'm like, vitamin D, maybe some omega-3s. And they're like, but what about this long list of companies and brands? And I'm like, nope, nope, and nope, because those are proprietary blends, which means they made it up. Essentially is what it means. And it's not to say that some people might not feel better. Obviously, with my background as a naturopathic doctor as well, I have a huge respect for herbal medicine, traditional medicines, all of the science of phytomedicines, but I don't believe that the marketing and the products that are out there actually reflect that traditional herbal medicine practice. I think it reflects wellness culture, which is here's a pill, it'll make everything better.
Yeah. Well, you and I are super aligned on the supplement answer because that's usually exactly my answer also. I want to actually back us up a second, and I'm going to ask you two questions at once so that I can get in before Tara.
I see you.
Yeah. So I would love for you to help people understand what are the biggest changes happening in our bodies as we go through perimenopause and through menopause into postmenopause. And then also, what are the biggest myths that you want to correct about it?
Ooh. Okay. Well, the first is kind of what's happening hormonally. And I like food analogies. So I describe it as a change in our hormone soup. So the hormone soup that you were making from puberty until some point in your late 30s, early 40s, if you go through spontaneous menopause, is very much the same. You have estrogen in the first half of your cycle, progesterone in the second half, assuming you have a cycle that's regular, of course, but just, the textbook version. And so when we're going through those monthly cycles, your body knows what to expect because we have estrogen and progesterone and other hormone receptors throughout our body. What happens in perimenopause is that all of a sudden you have some ingredient shortages. The recipe changes. It might not be made as regularly. You might end up making a double batch accidentally. And so your hormone levels are shifting a lot. And as a result, that hormone soup kind of reaches every corner of your body. And that is why we can experience everything from skin changes and joint changes to mood changes. We know that menopause is also a neurological event. It's not just a reproductive one. It's not just happening in the ovaries. So perimenopause is the roller coaster when maybe no 2 months are the same until you start to get to late perimenopause. And that's when you're really starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel, so to speak, of follicles and eggs. And then you might start skipping periods. And when you start skipping periods, you're going through longer phases without estrogen, without progesterone. So you're more likely to have some of those classical hot flashes, night sweats, those kinds of symptoms. And then once you hit that 12 months without a period, which is really just one day, that is menopause. And everything after that is postmenopause. For most people, things are starting to settle down in postmenopause, but that could still be a year or two. And we do know that some people somewhere in the kind of 8 to 10% range will continue to have symptoms many, many years after their period. So there really are no two, experiences that are alike. But if we're looking at the symptoms that are most common, obviously hot flashes and night sweats are going to top the list. And then sleep changes. I don't know about you, but certainly as I was going into perimenopause, my sleep just went completely off the rails. I had young kids because I was 37. I was young. And, my kids were finally sleeping through the night. And I remember this vividly, like crying and complaining to my husband, it's not fair. The kids are finally sleeping through the night and now I can't sleep through the night. So sleep changes, that 3 a.m. waking, all of those are really common, along with body changes and mood changes and skin changes. And so this new normal that we need to settle into can take a bit of time. And we know that some people will have symptoms for a long time. So some people might have symptoms starting early in perimenopause and lasting until long after, their last period. Whereas others might only have a few symptoms for a few years. And then there are some people that have none. So we're still learning about those people because, gosh, we need to study them.
Right.
But certainly there's a big variety, I guess is the best word, of symptoms that people might experience. So to your question about myths, well, I think probably the biggest myth is that you have to have hot flashes. So I hear this even from medical providers. People will say, oh, I went to my doctor and I asked about perimenopause and they said that I can't be in perimenopause because I'm not having hot flashes. So for anybody listening, hot flashes are not part of the diagnostic criteria. And so they really have no bearing on what stage or age you're in because you can have them at any stage, but you don't have to have them. About 25% of people don't. So that's probably one of the bigger myths. The other is that it's tied to an age. So we know that the majority of people will spontaneously or naturally go into menopause by 51 or 52 in North America, but 20% will meet the criteria for perimenopause by age 40. So we know that there's an overlap between the late reproductive stage when maybe your fertility is declining, but you're still having regular periods. And when you kind of cross the threshold into perimenopause, which technically only happens when your cycles start changing by more than 7 days. So a lot of people aren't really getting the right treatment because they're not getting the right diagnosis until well into perimenopause. And so I always like people to know that, yeah, absolutely. You may still be 50 by the time your periods stop, but you will be having symptoms of perimenopause for years before that. So those are a couple related to menopause. And of course, there are some nutritional ones. The one that I love talking about the most is carbohydrates. So we don't magically lose our ability to digest, metabolize, use them. Our needs around carbohydrates do not change. We still need them. And I would argue that when we're experiencing brain fog, we need them more.
Yeah.
So your brain runs on glucose. 125 grams of glucose a day is what your brain needs. And so this is not the time to restricting your brain's preferred fuel source, right? But also if we're thinking about movement, right, we need to be fueling that movement. It's really hard to find the energy when you're not sleeping. You've got all of the life things happening around you and you're having hot flashes. And if you add a low carbohydrate or ketosis on top of that, and that was my experience. Like that was my last diet, probably about 11, maybe 12 years ago now, was keto. And I felt awful. Didn't matter how much I tried to convince myself that I was feeling better. I felt awful. and zero endurance, right? I
did keto when
could
I was
run
in
for
high
10 minutes.
school and I hated it as well. I felt awful for months, for
Yeah.
sure.
And also there's a lot of good, there's studies looking at low carbohydrate diets and the ketogenic diet and the effect on the stress response. So everybody's loving to talk about cortisol these days. If we want to talk about cortisol, diets increase cortisol, and specifically ones that really stress your body out, like very low carbohydrate diets and ketosis, right? So we do not want to be stressing our body out at this stage,
Such a good
but
point.
also with sleep. So yeah, when people are not sleeping well, especially people who have difficulty to sleep, one of the first things I do is I say, well, tell me what you're having for supper. And if they say, well, I don't have any carbs at supper because I prefer to keep my carbs in the first half of the day, I'll say, let's add a little bit of, starch, some potatoes, some rice, or like have, a slice of peanut butter bread before bed. And it can be magical what it does for their sleep. Magical. So I think we underestimate how comforting and nourishing carbohydrates are, especially in this season when so many other things are changing. Let's keep the carbs
Agreed.
in. Our body and our
Yes.
brain wants us.
Love
I just met with
carbs in.
someone the other day in menopause who was sharing just how sluggish and low energy she is. And upon further conversation, she's been doing paleo or eating paleo for like 4 or 5 years. I was like, okay, I'm about to change your life. Add in some carbs, and
Yes.
I'll be shocked if you don't feel more energetic.
Yes, honestly. I mean, paleo, carnivore, that really heavy
Yeah.
protein, way of eating. By default, people are prioritizing protein and fat. And even if they're not intentionally
Right.
restricting carbohydrates, but many of them are, even when they're not intentionally doing it, they fall by the wayside. I had one
Yeah.
person, when she reintroduced bread in the morning, described it as rocket fuel. She could not believe how it turned her brain on. She hadn't felt that way in years.
I love
Because
that description.
yeah,
I love
she
that too.
she'd just gotten used to like trying to make do with like eggs in the morning. And that's all she would have was like an egg omelet. And so when I was like, let's throw some toast with that, like let's have some bread. And she was like, so yeah, I felt like I had rocket fuel this morning after breakfast. Like I got 20,000 things done. I was able to think clearly. It was such a great example, like an embodied experience to her about how much we need all of the macronutrients, not just the ones that build muscle.
Right.
I love those like Snickers commercials where they're like, "Oh, you're such a diva." And it's like Aretha Franklin in the back of a car with a bunch of boys. And then they're like, "You're such a diva when you're hungry. Here, have a Snickers." And then she eats the Snickers and turns back into like a 20-year-old boy with the rest of her friends. And it's like, you're not you
I
when you're
haven't seen that.
hungry. And I've
I was gonna say,
always
you watch
watched
different TV than me, Tara. I don't know this commercial.
this might be an old one, but I've always felt like these are the best commercials because like I'm sitting there like, dude, I am not myself when I'm hungry. Like, watch out. Everything will be dramatic and awful. And then you have something to eat, maybe not a Snickers, but maybe a Snickers. And all of a sudden your brain works better. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah.
Thinking about launching a podcast or taking yours to the next level? Giuliana Barbati and her team are the experts you need. They take care of everything from episode funnel design to production and marketing, so you can focus on creating content that connects. Check out julianabarbati.com and mention that we sent you.
So let's talk about the body changes that so many people experience. And I know kind of the conversations that I typically and often have with people around this, but I would love to hear your perspective. And, that woman who's sitting out there now thinking, I've gained so much weight, my body shape is different, I feel so uncomfortable, I don't recognize myself when I look in the mirror, I feel like I'm doing something wrong, just help me. Where do you start that conversation? What would you say to her?
The first thing I always start with is that menopause does not break your metabolism. And so that is, I guess, a myth as well. So menopause doesn't break your metabolism. It is not fundamentally changing how your body uses energy. So, that's kind of, I think, a big fear that people have, that once they hit menopause, it all breaks. And so let's just start with like some reassurance that it's not breaking. What does change, though, is where your body stores fat. And that is the redistribution of assets, as I call it. And so when we're going through this menopause transition, there is a slight decline in the amount of lean mass in our body and a slight increase in the amount of fat, of adipose tissue. When that increase in adipose tissue is happening, it is more likely to be around your midsection than it is to be on your hips and thighs. There's kind of a few different groups of people. There's the people who don't see a big change on the scale, but they see a huge change in how their clothes fit and what they see in the mirror. I think those people might be more affected by that redistribution, right? I would say that it's a minority of people who are not seeing scale changes, because I think anybody over the age of 40 will say that they're also seeing scale changes. Not that I ever recommend getting on a scale. And so we have that redistribution that's happening. And when it gets deposited around our midsection, for some people, that is going to be deposited as visceral fat or visceral tissue, which is where a lot of the, I guess, I don't want to say fear mongering, but where a lot of the metabolic health conversations kind of come into play. So people maybe who have been on a body acceptance journey will now all of a sudden feel a little bit scared, because they're like, I've been okay with my belly, but now it's gotten bigger. And my doctor says it's visceral fat and that I have to do something about that. Well, visceral fat isn't a problem unless it's inflammatory. And it is more likely to be inflammatory, like that is true, but there are studies that have looked at women who have had measurable increases in visceral fat and no measurable increase in inflammatory markers. So we don't need to assume that everybody who gains weight in midlife is inflamed and needs to immediately jump on this. We need to treat this change like we would any other metabolic health change. What are the behaviors that we can do that will influence the outcomes in health without making the number on the scale the measure of success? So the same things apply. Gentle nutrition, bit more protein, not a lot, a bit more protein, more fiber, more movement that you enjoy, and focus on things like sleep and stress management and social connections and the other things that can help to support your health. Probably the last thing I would say too is that we're also getting a convergence of like aging and menopause. And so as humans get older, there's a trend towards human bodies getting bigger. And we see this in both men and women. And so I think that it gets layered emotionally, physically, medically around the stage of life and becomes part of that fear-based messaging. But it really is a human body changing, because that's what human
I
body.
don't even think it's just the human body. Quite honestly, I was walking in my neighborhood the other day. One of my neighbors has two dogs of the exact same breed, and one of them is older, and one of them is probably more like an adolescent dog. And I was, minding my own business, walking by and looking at the two dogs in the yard, thinking like, it's so obvious which one is the older dog and which one is the younger dog. The younger dog is just leaner and, its body is different. And I just hate the narratives that we're doing something wrong if we gain weight as we get older. I think you can kind of watch bodies on a curve almost, right? Of like what bodies do throughout the lifespan. And then often they get thinner again in much older ages.
Which is not a good thing. Right?
Correct.
Like that's not a good thing.
Not if they're losing muscle mass, but I just think the narrative is so frustrating that we're just supposed to have this one ultra lean body and it's supposed to be like that throughout your entire life.
And, speaking of kind of getting older, I think that is where I try and direct the conversation. And how would you eat and move if you knew that this was going somewhere good? How would you eat and move if you knew that you were going to make it to 80 or 90 and, with your mobility and independence intact in as much ways as we can control? Like, what would you do differently? And I think that helps to shift the focus on why we still do want to care about food and movement. And pursuing intentional weight loss requires caloric restriction. And caloric restriction means that you're probably also going to lose some muscle. And losing muscle is easy. Building muscle is hard. So I want to do everything I can to maintain the muscle that I have and build more. That is actually going to help me maintain my independence, my health, my mobility, and all the things that I hope that I will have access to when I'm 80 or 90 or maybe even 100. But we get so focused on at 50 or 45, oh my gosh, I have this menobelly and I have to use all of my time and energy and emotional resources to deal with this now. Otherwise, it's going to be a problem for the rest of my life. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be something that you don't have to like or love it, right? We talk about that with body neutrality all the time. Like, you don't have to like or love it, but you can also learn to accept it without liking or loving it and move on, right? Without it becoming the focus of your life.
You know, we
So
did a
what are,
podcast
go ahead.
episode recently on like prepping for your 80-year-old lady body.
Yeah.
And it totally goes with this because, of course, I'm always
Yeah.
talking about building muscles so that you can like get off the toilet by yourself, you know, like simple things like that. So if you guys out there listening haven't listened to that episode, go back a few episodes from now. You will love it. It's been one of our most popular episodes to date. So I'm glad that you're kind of on the same wavelength that we are with that, because I think that's the important part, you know,
Yeah.
wanting to age how we want to age.
You know, and obviously, I believe in body autonomy. I always say that. So I'm never going to tell someone what to do if pursuing weight loss is what they really want to do. But I also don't think that we talk enough about what are the downsides of pursuing intentional weight loss in your 40s and 50s. And one of the big downsides is losing muscle, and that muscle is going to be harder to regain. It's going to be harder to build. And so your body might be smaller, but if it's weaker, is that really what you're hoping to get out of weight loss, right?
Also for bone health, like if you're restricting, you are likely, obviously under eating, which means you're probably not getting some of the really important nutrients you need. And that is one area that stands out immediately
And
in my mind.
also, a bigger body is actually better for your bones. I talk about that in the book, in the section on bone health, that there was a long study over 20 or 25 years that looked at people and looked at weight gain from premenopause through to postmenopause. And the people who were in the highest quartiles for weight gain actually had the lowest amount of bone density loss. I think it was at age 70 or 75. And so when we, talk about, well, what are the upsides of these body changes? One, your bones have to work harder to carry around a bigger body. That's a reality, and no one disagrees with that, right? So there is protection of bone health there. And some of that adipose tissue produces a weak type of estrogen as well. And so we may actually be getting some protection from that estrogen that's being produced. So there's so much that we don't know about women's health and menopause in particular, because we've just started studying it. So when we see, things about visceral fat and health, implications or complications from that, a lot of that is borrowed from data on men. It's borrowed from other age groups, other demographics. It's not specifically looking at midlife women or postmenopausal women. And I think that that's still a big question mark.
Such great points. So I'm wondering if there's anything that immediately comes to mind if you think about something that you would love women to stop doing during perimenopause or menopause.
Oh, to stop, like nutritionally, you mean?
Just any answer you want to give.
Oh, well, that's a really wide open field. Stop people pleasing.
We also have an episode on that just this week.
I just
think,
listened to that
actually.
one. That was a recent one. I like that one. Yeah, so people pleasing is definitely at the top of the list. But I think the thing that I want women to build is self-trust, which means letting go of other people's expectations of what they should eat, what they should look like, how they should move, and learning to turn that attention inwards. What do I want? What do I need? And being able to trust that you can listen to that you can trust that voice. And so letting go of the outsourcing, right? There's somebody who knows my body better than I do. There is somebody who can give me a plan. There is somebody who can tell me what to do. You can get information. Obviously, we're all, health professionals and experts in our field, and we help people with information. But I would like to think that we actually help people to take that information and insource it into something that matters to them, for them. It's not just to make us happy, right? It's not just to do it because we said to do it. It's to take that information and make it meaningful to them.
I feel like I remind my clients of that all the time. Like, hey, you're in your body. You know how it feels. I'm not in there. So if something doesn't feel right, like you got to let me know, because who's a better expert on your own body than you?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Tara, I literally have dozens of questions that I could keep asking you. There are so many things that I want to talk about, but I know we're coming up on time. So anything you want to wrap up with, Tara?
I
Questions?
also have like millions
Burning
of
to ask?
questions. Jen, we're going to have you back on at some
I
point
know.
because this was a great conversation. But I have one final question for you, and I got it from your podcast, actually. So, what's the missing ingredient that you think most women aren't getting when it comes to midlife nutrition?
Oh, well, I love this question. This is fun. So mine is community, actually, because, there's a quote that, we were never meant to do this alone. And I think it's Brené Brown. I should probably know that. But it was somebody who says wonderful things, that we were never meant to do this alone. And we say that to new mothers or people who are going through a hard time. And I think that menopause and midlife and really this whole post-menopause season that we're in, the missing ingredient is community. Because Elizabeth, like you, my kids are older. They'll be launched in a few years. Family dynamics change, people pass away, friends move, pass away. Like there's a big need for community. And so I think that's the missing ingredient.
I love that answer so much because I think that that's such an overlooked part of health anyway, in all stages of life. But you're right. There's so many things changing and shifting and happening at this stage of life. And that is the thing that we just don't hear people talk about enough.
And
Tara,
so
is that the
much
answer you
data.
were expecting?
No, but I love that answer because I feel like the whole reason. So, Jen, I opened my own training studio in January. And
Ooh, congratulations.
thank you. Like the whole thing behind it is the community. I was nervous because I was like one-on-one with my clients before that. But coming into the new studio, I kind of like bunched everybody up into like semi-private training groups. And I was nervous, like, oh, what if people don't like it? Whatever. But the community has like blossomed and thrived. And I think it goes back to exactly that. Like, we don't really have a village anymore. We don't have a village unless we pay for one. And we all need community, but we don't really have time for one. So when you come to a place like my studio, for example, or to our individual communities online, it's like, oh, yes, I was coming here anyway. And now I get the support that I needed from other people who are going through similar struggles, whether it's like prenatal, postpartum, or perimenopause. Like, I think we all need our village,
Yeah. And I mean, that's
Yeah.
the whole point of my community, the Midlife Feast community, is to connect with people who are either in the same stage, maybe a little bit ahead, a little bit behind, so that you can actually see what the journey is like. Maybe you can be a mentor to somebody else, because we need to see people who are on the same journey, who are doing okay, but also to see how far we've come.
Yeah.
Yeah, such a good point. So, Jen, anything you want to leave our audience with, and then tell everybody where they can find you?
Well, I think we've kind of been talking about it the whole time, but really just menopause is the end of your period. It is not the end of you. Yes, there are a lot of changes that are happening. And yes, you should absolutely find support for the uncomfortable parts, the parts that are hard. There is no need to knuckle your way through hot flashes and night sweats. And obviously, I love when food can be part of the solution, but I also never tell people that food is the only solution, right? Because we need to have all the tools in our toolbox. But yeah, menopause is the end of your period. It's not the end of you. That's so funny. Did I say? I hope I said it right the first time.
You did.
You did.
Menopause is the end of your period. It is not the end of
Like menopause brain right there.
And so I hang out on Instagram probably too much, but I'm there at menopause.nutritionist, and my podcast is The Midlife Feast, and you can usually find links to all the other things there.
Thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. And yeah, we would love to have you back on sometime.
Yes, this was amazing. Thank you.
So much.
Thank you for listening. If you want to connect with me outside of this podcast, you can find me on Instagram at coaching_therapist.
I'm Elizabeth. You can find me at Elizabeth Harris Nutrition or in my Facebook group, Health and Healing with Intuitive Eating.
And I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Tara DeLeon Fitness. Guys, if you loved this episode or any of our other episodes, we would love it if you would leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really, really helps us get the non-diet word out to the rest of the world. So please leave us a review.
Yes, thank you.